Most people think sleep is a shutdown. They imagine the body going dark, the mind going quiet, everything pausing until morning. But biologically, the opposite is true. Sleep is not the end of the day. It is the most intelligent part of it. It is when your brain finally has the silence it needs to repair itself. While you are unconscious, a quiet orchestra begins. Toxins are flushed out, damaged cells are recycled, neural pathways are strengthened, and memories are stitched into long-term storage. Even the tiny nerves behind your eyes, those delicate cables that translate light into meaning, enter a phase of renewal. In waking life, your brain is constantly reacting. Notifications, conversations, decisions, worries, every second, energy is spent outward. But sleep turns the mind inward. It becomes a workshop, a restoration lab, a place where the body asks a simple question: what needs to be fixed before tomorrow? This is why the hours before bed are so powerful. What you feed yourself at night does not just become energy for movement, it becomes material for reconstruction. It becomes part of the raw supply your brain uses to rebuild memory circuits and protect vision pathways. In other words, nighttime nutrition is not about hunger, it is about architecture. You are giving your future mind the building blocks it will work with while you dream. There is a psychological dimension to this that we often overlook. Every night is a boundary between who you were today and who you will be tomorrow. Sleep is the bridge, and what you place at that boundary, what you choose in those final moments, sends a message to your nervous system. It says either I am careless with myself or I am preparing for clarity. Your brain listens to that message, not metaphorically, literally. Blood sugar stability, mineral availability, fat composition in neural membranes, these are signals. They influence whether your mind spends the night in a state of calm repair or subtle stress. A restless brain does not restore well, a nourished one does. Think about memory for a moment. Memory is not formed when something happens, it is formed when you sleep. The experience of the day is raw data. Sleep is the processing center. During deep stages of rest, the brain decides what is worth keeping. It strengthens some connections and lets others fade. This is why students who sleep well remember more. It is why trauma becomes fixed in the absence of rest. And it is why what you consume before bed can either support or disrupt this delicate sorting process. Vision follows a similar principle. We treat eyesight as mechanical, like a camera, but it is neurological. Your eyes are extensions of your brain. Every visual signal travels through living tissue that depends on circulation, antioxidants, and electrical balance. During sleep, the visual system recalibrates. It reduces inflammation, it restores sensitivity. It prepares you to interpret the world again. So, when we talk about nighttime being the brain's repair window, we are really talking about identity. You are not just resting muscles, you are refining perception. You are editing memory. You are shaping how clearly you will see, both literally and mentally, tomorrow. Modern life, however, works against this process. Late night scrolling, artificial light, sugar spikes, heavy meals. These create internal noise. They confuse the body about whether it is safe to rest. The brain remains half alert, half tense. Repair becomes shallow. You wake up technically rested, but mentally foggy. You feel as though the night passed, but nothing truly reset. This is where intentional, simple nourishment becomes powerful, not as a diet trend, not as a miracle cure, but as a ritual, a signal, a quiet alignment with biology, a few natural foods before bed, especially those that digest gently and stabilize the internal environment, can shift the entire quality of your sleep. They provide steady energy instead of spikes. They offer minerals that calm neural firing. They carry fats that become part of brain cell membranes. They support circulation that reaches even the smallest vessels behind the eyes. And something subtle happens when this becomes a habit. You stop treating night as an escape. You begin to treat it as preparation. The mind relaxes more deeply when it senses that the body is cared for. There is a psychological safety in nourishment. The nervous system settles. Thoughts slow. Sleep deepens. This is not about perfection. It is about direction. Most transformation does not come from dramatic changes. It comes from small decisions repeated at meaningful moments. And there is no moment more meaningful than the threshold between days. Ask yourself what your current nighttime routine is training your brain to expect: chaos, stimulation, neglect, or restoration. Every evening, you are casting a vote for the quality of your future attention. You are shaping how well you will remember, how clearly you will see, how calm your inner world will feel in the morning. You are not just ending a day, you are designing the next one. When you begin to see sleep this way, food changes meaning. It is no longer just fuel for survival. It becomes a language, a way of telling your body, I value clarity, I respect my mind, I am building tomorrow, even now. And this is the deeper idea. Growth does not only happen in effort, it happens in surrender. It happens when you lie down and allow your inner systems to do what they were designed to do. But they can only work well with what you give them. So tonight, as you move toward rest, remember this: the mind you wake up with is being built while you sleep. Feed it accordingly. When we speak about the power trio, we are not talking about magic. We are talking about alignment, about foods whose natural chemistry happens to match what the brain and visual system need during their most vulnerable and most creative hours. Almonds, walnuts, and raisins have been part of human culture for thousands of years, long before laboratories could explain why they mattered. Ancient traditions noticed patterns: clearer thinking, steadier nerves, sharper sight. Modern science simply gives language to what intuition already knew. Each of these dry fruits offers something different, yet together they form a kind of quiet intelligence. Almonds are rich in vitamin E, a compound known to protect delicate tissues from oxidative stress. The retina is one of the most metabolically active parts of the body. It is constantly bombarded by light, and light is energy. Energy creates wear. Almonds provide a shield, helping preserve the integrity of those fragile structures that translate the world into vision. Walnuts bring something even more intimate to the mind. Their fats resemble the very fats that make up brain cell membranes. The shape of a walnut even mirrors the form of the brain, a coincidence that feels symbolic. Omega-3 fatty acids influence how neurons communicate. They affect flexibility, speed, and resilience. A brain lacking in these materials becomes rigid, easily fatigued. A brain nourished by them becomes adaptable. It thinks more smoothly. It remembers with less effort. Raisins seem humble by comparison. They are sweet, small, almost invisible, yet they carry natural sugars that release gradually, not violently. During sleep, the brain still consumes energy. It never truly rests. Raisins offer a gentle stream of fuel that prevents sudden drops in blood sugar, which can trigger stress hormones and disturb deep rest. They also provide iron and antioxidants that support circulation, ensuring oxygen reaches even the smallest neural pathways. The real power is not in any one of these foods alone. It is in their conversation. Almonds protect, walnuts build, raisins stabilize. Together, they create an internal environment where the nervous system can relax and restore. This mirrors something psychological. Human beings do not thrive on extremes. We thrive on bala. NCE. The mind repairs itself best when it feels safe, steady, and supported. These three dry fruits embody that principle. They are not stimulants. They do not force the body into action. They cooperate with its rhythms. Think about how often we search for solutions that are dramatic. We want breakthroughs, hacks, instant clarity. But biology does not work that way. The brain is shaped by repetition. Memory is carved through consistency. Vision is preserved through daily protection. These foods work not because they shock the system, but because they quietly participate in it. There is also a philosophical lesson here. Each of these foods comes from a different transformation. Almonds emerge from hard shells, walnuts grow enclosed within protective layers. Grapes become raisins only through time and drying. They teach us that nourishment is not always obvious. Value is often hidden inside ordinary forms. Just as the mind's greatest work happens invisibly at night, the most powerful nutrients often arrive in small, simple packages. When people hear about brain food, they often imagine something rare or expensive, but the body does not require luxury. It requires compatibility. Almonds, walnuts, and raisins are compatible with human physiology because they evolved alongside us. They are ancient allies. And what you choose before sleep becomes a psychological statement. It is easy to underestimate how deeply habits speak to identity. When you reach for something chaotic, processed sugar, stimulation, distraction, you reinforce the idea that the mind exists to be consumed. When you reach for something intentional, you reinforce the idea that the mind exists to be cultivated. This is not about restriction, it is about relationship. You begin to relate to your brain not as a tool to exhaust, but as a living system to protect. Over time, that relationship changes how you treat yourself in daylight. You become more patient with your own cognition. You notice when fatigue is not weakness, but a signal. You listen. These three dry fruits become more than nutrients. They become a ritual, a pause, a moment where you say, the work of the day is ending. The work of restoration is about to begin. That transition matters. It creates psychological closure. The mind releases its grip more easily. Sleep deepens. Memory improves not because something miraculous occurred, but because the conditions for consolidation were respected. Vision feels steadier not because eyes were forced to change, but because inflammation was reduced, circulation improved, and tissues were allowed to recover. The deeper truth is this: clarity is built in quiet moments. We tend to associate growth with effort, but some of the most profound changes occur when we stop striving and start supporting. The power trio does not push the brain, it partners with it. And partnership is what the mind truly needs. The brain is not an enemy to conquer, nor a machine to override. It is an ecosystem. It responds to tone, rhythm, and care. Feed it gently, and it will respond with resilience. So when you place these foods in your hand before bed, understand what you are really holding. You are holding protection for your perception. You are holding materials for tomorrow's thoughts. You are holding a message to your future self. The smallest rituals often shape the largest outcomes. Tonight's choice becomes tomorrow's clarity. What makes these foods extraordinary is not just what they contain, but how the body interprets them. The nervous system is not a passive machine that simply absorbs calories. It is a responsive network, constantly reading chemical cues and deciding how to behave. Every bite you take becomes information. It tells your brain whether the environment is safe or stressful, stable or chaotic, abundant or scarce. Almonds, walnuts, and raisins speak a language your nervous system understands. They do not shout, they whisper, they stabilize rather than stimulate. And in doing so, they shift the internal climate in which your brain and eyes operate. One of the most overlooked enemies of mental clarity is instability, especially in blood sugar. Sudden spikes and drops trigger stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals are useful in emergencies, but destructive during rest. They keep the brain half alert, scanning for threats that are not there. In that state, deep repair cannot happen. Memory consolidation becomes fragmented. Visual processing remains tense. These dry fruits create the opposite message. Their natural composition releases energy slowly. There is no crash, no alarm. The brain receives a steady signal. You are safe. You are supported. That signal alone changes neural behavior. Electrical firing becomes smoother. The mind drifts more easily into deeper stages of sleep where true restoration occurs. But there is more than energy regulation happening. Circulation is quietly improving. The tiny vessels that feed the retina and the deeper regions of the brain depend on flexibility and flow. Inflammation narrows these pathways. Oxidative stress stiffens them. The compounds in these foods, vitamin E, polyphenols, healthy fats, reduce the T friction. Blood moves with less resistance. Oxygen reaches further. Even the most delicate nerve fibers benefit. This is why people often describe a sense of brightness when their nutrition improves. It is not imaginary. The brain is literally receiving clearer signals. Visual input becomes sharper not because the eyes change shape, but because the pathways interpreting light became healthier. Thought becomes smoother not because intelligence increased, but because neural communication became more efficient. The nervous system thrives on coherence. When signals travel cleanly, the mind feels calm. When they are distorted by stress chemistry, the mind feels noisy. Food is one of the fastest ways to influence that coherence. There is a psychological mirror here. We often treat our inner world the same way we treat our outer one, filling it with interruptions, extremes, and urgency. The result is cognitive static, difficulty focusing, memory that feels unreliable, vision that feels tired, These foods counter that pattern not by force, but by example. They demonstrate a different rhythm, slow, stable, integrated. Over time, the brain learns this rhythm. Neural pathways adapt. The stress response softens. The baseline state shifts from vigilance to readiness. You begin to experience clarity not as an effort, but as a default. This is what it means for food to talk. To the nervous system, it is not a metaphor, it is chemistry translated into experience. Every neuron is surrounded by a membrane. That membrane's flexibility determines how quickly and accurately signals pass. The fats in walnuts become part of that structure. Every antioxidant in almonds becomes part of a defense system that keeps those membranes intact. Every mineral in raisins becomes part of the electrical balance that allows neurons to fire at the right moment. Your thoughts tomorrow are being shaped by what your neurons are made of tonight. And yet, this process is invisible. You do not feel a vitamin entering a cell. You do not sense an omega fat embedding in a membrane. What you feel is the result: mental ease, steadier attention, less friction between intention and action. This is why habits matter more than inspiration. You do not need to remember 1,000 facts about nutrition. You only need to remember that your brain is listening. Every evening, your nervous system asks a question: what kind of world am I in? The answer comes from light, sound, emotion, and food. When the answer is chaos, it prepares for defense. When the answer is care, it prepares for growth. This extends beyond biology. It becomes a philosophy of self-treatment. When you feed your brain gently, you practice a form of respect. You stop relating to yourself as a resource to exhaust and start relating to yourself as a system to sustain. That shift has consequences. You become more patient with your own learning. You allow memory to form naturally instead of forcing it. You trust your perception instead of doubting it. The mind relaxes because it is no longer under constant threat from within. Clarity is not only about seeing better, it is about living in a mind that feels like home rather than a battlefield. And that is the real transformation these foods offer. They do not just change chemistry, they change relationship. They teach the nervous system that restoration is allowed. You begin to understand that intelligence is not only measured by how much you can do, but by how well you can recover. That wisdom is not only in thought, but in rhythm. That vision is not only in the eyes, but in the way the mind receives the world. When you align with that truth, every small choice becomes meaningful, not heavy, not dramatic, meaningful. So tonight, when you reach for something simple and nourishing, remember what is happening beneath the surface. Your brain is listening, your eyes are listening, your future self is listening. And in that quiet conversation, you are teaching your nervous system how to become clear. We often underestimate the force of small actions because they do not announce themselves. They arrive quietly, without drama, without applause. A few almonds, a walnut or two, a handful of raisins. It feels almost insignificant compared to the scale of our ambitions. We want transformation, and this feels too simple to matter. But the human end is not shaped by grand gestures. It is shaped by patterns. Your brain is a learning system. It does not respond to what you do once. It responds to what you do repeatedly. Every repeated action becomes a message. Over time, that message becomes a belief. And eventually, that belief becomes identity. This is how habits work. Not as rules you follow, but as stories you tell your nervous system about who you are. When you make a small, consistent choice before sleep, something subtle happens. You begin to associate night with care, with intention, with preparation rather than collapse. The mind starts to anticipate restoration. That anticipation itself deepens rest. The body becomes more cooperative. The brain releases control more easily. And because the brain repairs in cycles, the benefits are cumulative. One night of deep sleep feels good, but 10 nights change your baseline. 30 nights begin to shift how you experience yourself. Focus becomes easier. Mental fog thins. Visual fatigue lessens. You wake up not feeling heroic, but clear. This is the power of compounding. In finance, we understand that small, regular investments grow into something far larger than their initial value. Biology works the same way. A single nutrient does not change a life, but a ritual does. What makes this particularly powerful is its gentleness. There is no force here, no struggle, no discipline that feels like punishment. It is an act of alignment. You are not fighting your nature, you are cooperating with it. Modern culture teaches us that improvement requires strain. Push harder, wake earlier, do more. But the nervous system does not evolve under pressure alone. It evolves under safety. It strengthens when it knows it will be restored. When your brain begins to trust that night is a place of nourishment, not depletion, it stops bracing. It stops guarding. It lets go. This changes how you think in the morning. You are less reactive, more spacious. You respond rather than rush. Memory retrieval becomes smoother because the brain is not operating in a background of fatigue. Visual processing feels lighter because inflammation has been allowed to settle. And the most interesting part is that this habit often expands. You begin to notice other small opportunities for care. You drink water with more awareness. You pause before overwhelming yourself. You start listening to the signals of tiredness instead of overriding them. A tiny ritual becomes a doorway to self-respect. There is a philosophical depth in this. Human beings often wait for permission to treat themselves well. We believe we must earn rest, clarity, or health. But the body does not understand moral contracts. It only understands conditions. You do not become worthy of restoration after success. Restoration is what makes success sustainable. By choosing a small, nourishing act at night, you reverse a hidden assumption that your future self must pay for your present neglect. Instead, you become someone who prepares the ground for tomorrow. This shift changes your relationship with time. You stop living only in reaction to the present moment. You begin living in dialogue with the future. You act as though tomorrow matters. That is a powerful identity to inhabit. And because the action is small, it is repeatable. It does not demand willpower at the end of a long day. It feels like a kindness, something you do for yourself rather than against yourself. Consistency grows where gentleness lives. Over weeks, the nervous system begins to associate evening with safety. Cortisol lowers earlier. Melatonin rises more naturally. Sleep deepens, not because you tried to control it, but because you created the conditions it needs. Memory improves because the brain has time and resources to sort. Vision steadies because tissues are no longer in a state of chronic irritation. You feel more present because your mind is no longer recovering from itself. These changes do not shout, they whisper, but they persist, and persistence is what transforms. The world trains us to chase outcomes, better grades, sharper focus, clearer thinking, stronger memory. But outcomes are shadows. They follow processes. When you honor the process, the outcome arrives quietly behind you. A few pieces of food before sleep become a practice in trust. Trust that your body knows how to heal. Trust that small things matter. Trust that care is more powerful than control. You begin to understand that self-improvement is not always about adding effort. Sometimes it is about removing friction, giving your inner systems permission to work. Every night you are either compounding fatigue or compounding clarity. The choice does not require motivation, only awareness. And awareness, once it settles, becomes action. So let this be simple. Let it be light. Let it be something you can do even on your most ordinary day, because ordinary days are what build extraordinary minds. Tonight, choose to invest in the person you will wake up as.